Like number arithmetic, date-time objects can also be added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided. For example, you might want to subtract dates from each other to find out the length of the interval between two dates. You might want to add the dates together to generate a new date in future. You might want to divide one time span by another to work out the number of weeks in a certain time span. So in this video, we will use some of the arithmetic expressions on date-time objects and find out some interesting information from the datasets. We'll also have a look at the concept of time span. Time spans, by the way, are very difficult to understand because they don't have a constant meaning. For example, if I say to add one day to a date time, you need to define what do you mean by one day. One day could mean a calendar day, or it could as well mean 86,400 seconds in future. Lubridate package does this by providing two different classes of time spans: duration class and periods class. At the end of the video, we will go through the difference between the durations and period class using an example. So let's start with date arithmetic. Let's do some simple arithmetic with dates. Now, let us recall a significant event that occurred in August 2023, which made India a proud nation in space technology. On 23rd of August 2023 at 12:33 UTC, the spacecraft named Chandrayaan-3 was successfully landed on the moon, making India the fourth country in the world to do so. Now, can we able to find out how many days the spacecraft had to travel before landing on the moon surface? Chandrayaan-3 was launched from Satish Dhawan Space Center on 14th of July 2023 at 9:05 UTC. So we'll use these two dates and we will subtract these two dates to find out the number of days the spacecraft had traveled before landing on the moon surface. Okay, so we will create a launch date using a passing function dmy_hm, 14/07/2023, the 14th of July, and we will create a land date again with using dmy_hm passing function on 23rd/08/2023, that is 23rd of August 2023. So these two date objects we will subtract together and store them in time travel, and this time travel object will give us the time difference of 40 days. That means it took the spacecraft 40 days from the date of launch to reach to the moon. Now if we divide this 40 days by 7, we will get the number of weeks. So let's do that. Now I'm going to divide it by 7 and the answer that I am getting here is 5.73 days. So it took nearly 5 weeks for the spacecraft to reach to the moon. Now if you see the answer, you will get confused. The answer displayed in days instead of in weeks. So can we correct this unit of time? Now when we subtract one date from another, at the back end R uses diff_time function to calculate the difference. Now we will carry out the same calculation using diff_time function, but using diff_time function you can explicitly tell to calculate the subtraction or to calculate the arithmetic in the time units that you want. So we will give the three arguments to the diff_time function: the time 1, the time 2, and the units in which we want the results. So here is a function diff_time, landing date, which is time 1, launching date, which is time 2, and units in this case is weeks. So after using this function, we get the answer. We get the same answer, but the unit of time is changed from days to weeks. Right, so now let's take some example from the business world. Let's say that we have this transaction data, and this data has three dates: the invoice date, the due date, and the payment date. The invoice date is a date on which the invoice is generated. Due date is a date on which the payment is due. And payment date is a date on which the actual payment is disbursed. Now, using these three dates, we will try to find out how many days are required to settle the invoice and how many invoices were settled post due date. So again, we will have to use the subtraction here. So we will have to subtract invoice date from the payment date to find out the number of days required to settle the invoice. Again, we will use the diff_time function. So remember these three variables here, these three dates: invoice, due date, and payment date. The class of these dates is a character class and not the date class. So we will have to convert the character class into a date class using the passing function, and that's what we have done here. And units we have kept as days. So as you can see from the result, the dates to pay column is created and you will get the number of days since the invoice is due. Coming back to the second question, how many invoices were settled post due date? We can find this by subtracting the due date from the payment date and counting the number of rows where delay is positive. So again, we will use a diff_time function. We will use payment date, due date, unit as days. But here we will use some functions from the mutate. But here we will use some functions from the dplyr package to filter out the positive delays and count those positive delays. So after doing the counting calculation, the first 6 results, if we display, then we'll find out that there are around 56 cases in which the payment is delayed by 6 days. By the way, if you're not familiar with the workings of the filter and count function and mutate function, these 3 functions are from the dplyr package, then you may like to refer to my video series on the dplyr package. You'll find the link of the videos in the description. In a similar way, if you are not comfortable in using any of these passing functions that we have used so far, then you may also like to refer to my first video in this playlist, which talks about using passing functions to convert the dates into a date time class. The link you will find in the description of this video. Okay, moving ahead for Infosys now. So let's come back to the dataset that we have been using since our first video, the Infosys Limited share price dataset. Now for this dataset, we are interested in finding out the number of shares traded in terms of its value and in terms of its volume for the Q1 of the financial year. Now this example is considered for the discussion to show you that the data objects also work with comparison operators, less than, equal to, greater than, comparison operators. So in this data set, we will have to find out the number of share transactions in terms of volume and value of Infosys Limited for Q1 period. Right, so that's what we want to find out. Now we will use the greater than, less than comparison operators to filter out the Q1 period. In India, Q1 starts on 1st of April of that particular financial year and ends on 30th of June. So let's build the pipeline. We will have to use the comparison operators to filter out this time interval. Again, we will use the passing functions, and here we go. So we have used the greater than comparison operator on 31st of March 2022 and less than comparison operator on 1st of July 2022. So all the dates which are in between 1st of April to 30th of June are filtered out using these comparison operators. And then we have used summarize function to find out the total volume and total value of the shares. So you get the results, and these results we could able to get by using the comparison operators on datetime objects. Great. Now so far we have used subtraction, division and comparison arithmetic on datetime. In the next part of the video, we will try to understand the concept of time span. Now time span is a bit difficult concept to understand because you have two time span classes in R, rather in lubridate package. You have a duration class and you have a period class. So let's try to look at them closely. Let's first understand the syntactical difference between these two classes. How to differentiate between a duration and period. How to differentiate whether the duration is being used or the period is being used in the analysis. So if you look at the following table, you will find out that all the helper functions for creating the time period are named after the units of time. So years, year, days, days, weeks, weeks. You have to simply use the units of time as a name of the helper function. That's pretty cool. That's very simple. But you will have to understand a subtlety here. Now the subtlety here is that all these units of time are used in plural form. So year is used as years, day is used as days, week is used as weeks, and so on in the plural form. And for the duration, the helper functions starts with D. So D stands for duration. And for period, there is no change. So if you want to differentiate between the duration and period, the helper function, if it starts with D, if it has a prefix D to it, then it's a duration function. If it doesn't have a prefix D to it, then it's a period function. That's how do you differentiate. So that's the syntactical difference. Now let's try to understand the fundamental difference between the duration and the period. Okay, now duration is a fixed time period. That means durations are not influenced by leap years or other time changes. We can say that duration follows a stopwatch concept of time span. So it adds or subtracts a fixed number of seconds to the current date to calculate the future or past date. So let's take an example here. So I've created a date 1, which is 1st of Jan 2024. And I'm adding a duration here. Remember DES, it's the ES function is prefixed by D. So DES, it's a duration function. I'm adding 1 year to that date 1. And the result that I would expect is 1st of Jan of next year, 1st of Jan 2025. Now if I execute this, look what happened. So instead of getting the result as 1st of Jan 2025, we got the result as 31st of December 2024. So what is going on here? Is there anything wrong? There is nothing wrong in the calculation. Remember, duration follows stopwatch concept of time span. So when we add 1 year to the date, duration adds fixed 365 days to the current date and gives us the result. But if you notice, the year 2024 is a leap year. That means it has one additional day, 29th of Feb, in the year, making it 366 days a year and not 365 days a year. And that made a difference. Duration, because doesn't take this subtle difference into account, it adds flat 365 days and calculates the answer, and that's why we got 31st of December 24 instead of 1st of Jan 25. Now, if the durations are giving us such wrong answers, then when to use duration classes? Now, duration classes are recommended when comparing time-based objects, such as speed or execution time, where this time-based calculations doesn't take into account the calendar days. So you have to simply add some number of days to the current date and find the answer. For example, how much time that project took to the completion. So here I would be interested in knowing only the days and not the subtleties, whether that year has a leap year, or whether there is any change in the in the time zones. All these all these complexities I don't want. I just want one number, and that number tells me how much of the execution time has gone into completing the project. So in that case, in these scenarios, you can use the durations. Now let's understand the period. The period uses human concept of time span. Periods will take into account the leap year, the daylight saving time, and other time related subtleties and produce the result. Periods are used in calculating the differences in calendar days. So if we use the same example, let's use the same example. Now I am going to add years to the current date 1 object. Remember, I'm using years. It is not prefixed with d. That means I'm using period here and not the duration. And the answer I got is the correct answer. The result is correct. Now, because the period uses the human concept of time span, that means it has taken into account the leap year calculation. So it added 366 days and gave us the result. So we have seen the arithmetic performed on date time objects. In the same way, you can perform the arithmetic on periods and durations. So days function will give me the output as day. This is a period function, remember. If I multiply this by 2, then the output will be 2 days. You can also pass on the argument to the days function. So days 2 will give me the same result as 2 days. Now, if I use the duration function prefixed with d days 2, for example, it has given me the number of seconds as the output. So 1 day constitutes 86,400 seconds. 2 days constitutes this many seconds that you see on the screen. So remember, duration, because it adds fixed number of units, it simply calculates is time by adding those many seconds to the current date. So you can also add the period, you can also subtract the period as well as the duration. Right, so let's quickly summarize what we have learned so far. We can perform arithmetic with date times. We can add dates, subtract dates, perform division and multiplication. We can also use comparison operators on date times. We perform some of the arithmetic operations on transaction data set. We also use comparison operators to filter out the quarter 1 time range from the share price data set. Lubridate package has 2 general time span classes, the duration class and the period class. Duration class follows up the stopwatch concept of time span. Duration year, for example, will always equal 365 days. This duration class won't take into account leap years or any other time changes. Period, on the other hand, period class follows human concept of time span. Period will take care of leap year, daylight saving calculation and generate the results. Syntactically, what is the difference? Syntactically, periods and durations have the same helper functions. Remember, all these helper functions are named after period of time in plural form. Though for duration, this function starts with prefix d. All arithmetic and comparison operations can be performed on duration and period classes. So we have come to the end of the video. Thank you very much for sticking in till the end. If you are finding these videos useful, then you may like to subscribe to this channel. I normally post the videos on every weekend or so. At least you will get one video a week. So that's the frequency I have in posting the videos. So if you subscribe to this channel, then you will get the immediate notification as soon as I post the new videos on YouTube. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching till end. I will see you soon.